Coming up on the Inside Indiana Business Television podcast, we stop by the Indiana State Fair to talk about this year's event, take a look at the state of ag through the eyes of the state director as well as a Hoosier farmer, and spotlight some of the latest in Hoosier-made ag tech. In addition, the IU Cancer Center earns a key designation, INDYCAR taps into hybrid technology, and our panel of insiders gives perspective on the week's top stories. Welcome to the Inside Indiana Business Television podcast. I'm Andy Ober. For more than 160 years, the Indiana State Fair has been a gathering place for Hoosiers to learn about Indiana agriculture, be entertained, and enjoy unique fair food. We took the first half of this week's show on the road to the fair. Indiana State Fairgrounds and Event Center Vice President of Development Ray Allison joined Inside Indiana Business host Gary Dick to talk about the business of the fair.
Well, Ray, we're just starting out the 2019 edition of the Indiana State Fair, an event that certainly has a big economic impact. But first of all, let's talk about what folks can expect this year, 2019, when they come out to the fair.
Sure. This year's fair is all about heroes. So we're celebrating heroes in the heartland. And we're trying to prop up everyday Hoosier heroes, whether they be teachers, those in the military. We're even honoring our four-legged heroes with an IMPD canine dog, which was really, really fun to do. And we're propping up farmers every day at the fair too, especially in this year being so rough on farmers with the weather that we've had. So we're honoring heroes of the field, heroes of the classroom, and just everyday community heroes as well. We think it's really important to remind people what this state is all about and the people that live here and make it what it is.
Well, I think sometimes people take for granted the fair from an economic standpoint, the economic impact that the fair has.
Yeah, the fair itself, we just updated an economic impact study last year, and the fair itself is about $32 million in direct economic impact to the city of Indianapolis and the state of Indiana. So it's the state's largest multi-day event. An average of about 900,000 people will come through our gates over these 17 days. And when you put that in perspective, that's a lot of people in a short amount of time that come here really to have a good time, eat a lot of great food, and learn something about Indiana agriculture.
And if you come to the fairgrounds and walk around, if you haven't been here for a few years, you will see that there is big investment being made in new buildings, new infrastructure. One of the big recent announcements of $50 million for a new swine barn.
Yeah, we're really excited about that. It's our last, I'll say, historic open air building that was built specifically for livestock. It was built in 1923. It hasn't seen much change in almost 100 years. And in today's society, or even for our livestock exhibitors, they want modern conveniences. They want an enclosed building. They want a safe building, an efficient building, air conditioning, an easy way to get their hogs in and out. And it's just going to make a huge difference for them. And most importantly for us, it'll become a year-round event venue like the rest of our buildings. And we can rent it on a year-round basis and drive revenue.
You talk about buildings and new buildings and the soybean experience with the glass barn.
Yes.
About education and about letting Indiana know what modern agriculture and the ag biosciences are about, especially when it comes to careers.
Yeah, fairs were created to promote agriculture. That's why we exist. And in the early days, they were all about farmers coming together and learning from one another. But recently, as people have become more and more separated from the farm, what we've really become is a way for agriculture to reach consumers, to teach them about where their food comes from, what it takes to produce the food that we eat. And we take that mission very, very much to heart. It's part of everything that we do, and every year we think about how we can be better and how we can do more to teach people about modern agriculture. And not only the food they eat, but how Indiana farmers and American farmers are helping us feed the world.
Well, everybody recognizes the Indiana State Fair, but this is the Indiana State Fair grounds, and this truly is a year-round venue.
It really is. We have a little over 400 events that are held on our campus every year, including the Indy Fuel, IUPUI men's basketball programs that play in the Indiana Farmers Coliseum right behind us. But the overall fairgrounds has a direct economic impact of almost $200 million to the city of Indianapolis. And what we think is equally important to that is the job equivalency of that is almost 1,100 jobs to our local economy. It makes us really proud that we can play that kind of role in our city and our state 12 months a year.
Ray Allison is the Vice President of Development for the Indiana State Fair Commission. Ray, thanks for joining us.
Thank you for having me.
All right.
Still to come, farming through the eyes of a Hoosier farmer, and what's next in ag tech. But first, In 2017, agricultural production in the U.S. neared $400 billion, with more than $11 billion coming from Indiana. That puts Indiana in the top 10 for total ag products sold by state. But what about this year? Indiana State Department of Agriculture Director Bruce Kettler weighs in.
Well, Bruce, here we are at the Indiana State Fair. Always a great time of year, and at least so far the weather has been pretty good.
It has.
From a State Department of Agriculture standpoint, talk about the importance. This is such an Indiana tradition, an iconic event each and every Sunday, but what does it mean to agriculture in general?
Well, the important part of this to me is that the State Fair has continued to be a strong outlet, a strong advocate for the industry of agriculture. Obviously, many years ago, it was a way, and we still exhibit animals and display our wares. But what I really like about what they're doing at the State Fair is the fact that they continue to educate people about where their food comes from, where their clothing comes from, even fuel. And that is really part of the mission of the State Fair, is to continue to do that. And it's not just during these 17 days of the State Fair, it's all year round. And it starts with young people. The State Fair is bringing young people in for classroom work in places like the Normandy Barn year round. Yep. And that education mission continues. And it's just maybe the focus is maybe slightly different, because we want to make sure that consumers know where their food comes from, how it's produced, how it's grown, how it's raised, and that continues to be a big part of the mission for the State Fair.
Agriculture, the ag bioscience is such an important part of the Indiana economy, and unfortunately this year those spring rains and heavy rains later have really caused a lot of problems for farmers. Give us the latest. What, in your view, in terms of the impact you're maybe thinking it's going to have on the economy?
Yeah, it's going to be real variable. As you drive around the state, you see some areas that look pretty decent. They're delayed. There's no doubt at least a month delayed. Some cases even more than that. Crops are getting big enough where sometimes maybe you don't see all the problems necessarily. And there are areas of the state, I would say generally speaking, northeast Indiana that had a lot of prevent planted. You get down into central Indiana the same way, through Boone, Hamilton, other parts of central Indiana, really impacted. Areas of southern Indiana that may have gotten crops planted, had crops up, and then when we got those couple of weeks of heavy rain in June, then they got floods, and they flooded crop that was already planted and really destroyed a lot of crop. So it's variable. There is no doubt there will be significant impact. We will have prevent planted acres, hopefully a good idea of what that is in Indiana in a couple weeks.
So beyond the challenges with the spring rains and now dry conditions around the state, Mexico, trade relations, the U.S.-Mexico-Canada trade agreement. You were in Mexico with the Lieutenant Governor. Tell us the status of that agreement.
Well, that we signed some letters of intent to work in the Mexican state of Hidalgo. We had really good discussions with Mexican officials, including the Mexican Secretary of Agriculture, and I felt really good about the mission. One thing that we found in doing these missions, we can have these trade agreements, and which of course are negotiated at the federal level, and we need those to be able to set the ground rules. But people still do business with people. That relationship building is still a critical part of what we're doing with these missions, to be able to get business or maybe even the academic communities involved with their counterparts in these countries. We had some folks from Canada that came back in June, and we did more work on our Canada mission that we had from last fall. So we really think it's important to continue building those relationships. Once those agreements get signed, get passed, then we'll have a base to work from.
Final question I want to ask you about, you've got a rural economic development initiative, and rural Indiana, some areas around the state are very challenged. Some are doing well, some not so well. Give us the thumbnail on that effort.
Yeah, so we continued the rural economic development model. We rolled that out in February when we had the ag census data. That has continued to be very positive. In fact, we're really pleased with local economic development groups, what they're doing to look at the information they've got, find out what agriculture assets are in their areas and in their communities, and then work to put a plan together to build. And again, this is a way to be able to support farmers from a standpoint of they produce it. We want to have people that will be able to make sure we process it in the future.
Later in the podcast, a look at the next wave of ag tech and a big designation for the IU Simon Cancer Center. But now, AccuWeather analysts predict this year's corn yield will be more than 11% lower than an April USDA estimate. What does it mean for Hoosier farmers? Lamb Farms Vice President Don Lamb joined us with his perspective.
Well, Don, give us a thumbnail description of Lamb Farms. Second-generation farmer, right?
Second-generation farmer. I'm proud of my dad. He grew up not far from right here, and I was a city boy, went to Butler, and then got a business degree, in which I always think that really helped our farm in getting started. And so I farm with my dad and my brother and our families, and we've got some great employees, and we raise a lot of corn, soybeans, and wheat here in central Indiana, Boone County.
How much ground do you farm?
We farm about 10,000 acres.
Yeah, so sizable operation. Talk about this year, 2019, tough year for the farm industry. How are you getting along, and how are you kind of coping with this situation, if you will?
Well, there has been a lot of stress this year, and in my dad's 56 years, he's never had a year like this, and we say things like that a lot, but it's really unusual to have a year where we really have some ground that did not get planted. 120 acres on our farm didn't get planted. That's the first time ever. And Boone County, I would guess, may have 20 or 30,000 acres not planted. And that's incredible. And so it's one thing to say, yeah, we're having a tough year, but this one's pretty extreme. And so there's been a lot of stress. We kind of have a theme now. It just says it's 2019, right. And so now it's dry. And so now we're kind of fighting the dry side of it. And I think most of us are kind of saying, well, it's 2019. We just have to wait and see what God gives us in the end.
And this difficult 2019 really affects the entire industry, suppliers, the whole ecosystem, if you will.
Yeah, I had a fuel salesman show up at the farm in late May and was saying, when do you think you might get going? And it kind of hit me. Their tanks were full, their pipelines were full, and you think, wow, this is really affecting the whole industry. And a lot of times we as farmers don't think about that so much. We need a healthy industry. We need the input suppliers to be healthy. We need our markets to be healthy. And so a year like this, it affects everybody, and it's not just the farmers that take the brunt.
For those who are not in farming or familiar with farming, what can a farmer do? What can you do to kind of mitigate the losses or deal with a down year like this?
Well, there is crop insurance, and so you make that decision way before you plant the crop. You can't come in after the fact and say, I need some crop insurance. So you make that decision back in the wintertime. So hopefully guys made that decision, and that's very important. And when we talk about the Farm Bill, that's a subsidized program, and it's important to us, and it's necessary. So that's the big thing. And then other than that, you just try to be timely. You do everything you can to do everything on time. The weather dictates so much of that that it adds to the stress. But at some point, you just can do what you can do.
Final question for you. Aside from the tough year this year, how would you assess the health of the farm economy, in particular in Indiana? How are things?
Yeah, it is tough. The markets are really tough with the tariffs and all the things going on with trade. We'd love to get the USMCA passed. There's lots of things like that are already a problem to us, and then you throw this weather thing on this year, and it's really tough. I would say, as farmers, we don't like to say that too much, and sometimes I think we're viewed as we always have something to complain about. This year, I'm telling you, we have something to complain about, but we also are proud that we're going to go on, we're going to get through it, and 2020 will be another year, and we'll try it again.
The farmer, I have always said, is the ultimate entrepreneur. And Don Lamb, Lamb Farms in Boone County, thanks very much, and good luck.
Thank you.
All right.
Remember, you can catch Inside Indiana Business Television on stations throughout the state every weekend. Head to InsideIndianaBusiness.com to check listings. Still to come, the IU Simon Cancer Center joins Elite Company, and hybrid technology is coming to INDYCAR. But first, Reynolds Farm Equipment is a prominent equipment dealer serving farmers, homeowners, landscapers, and golf courses in Indiana, Kentucky, and Ohio. The company launched nearly 65 years ago in a small farming town of 350. CEO Mitch Frazier and Ag Technology Solutions Manager Craig Benedict spoke with reporter Mary Rachel Redman at the fair about what's next in ag tech.
Large tractors and combines, equipment familiar to just about every farm in Indiana for over 100 years. But what's changed about this machinery is the amount of built-in technology that's enabling farmers to be more precise and yield more crop with just the touch of an iPad.
As we look at the agricultural industry, specifically as it relates to equipment, what we've seen is an evolution. Just like we've seen in our consumer lives, ag equipment is parallel. We've gone from hardware and software being two different things to now becoming a solution. And we're seeing the same thing happen in equipment. Used to, you'd buy a tractor or a combine and bolt on technology. Today, it's completely integrated into everything we do, whether you're sitting in the seat or whether you're going back to the farm and analyzing the data on planting or harvest. Everything comes together at that intersection of hardware and software.
Some of the newest technology featured in today's farming equipment includes the integration of artificial intelligence, as well as several other features that are helping farmers to be more precise in planning with less effort.
The tractors are coming now from the factory with displays, GPS receivers, multiple constellations of satellites now to get accuracy down to 1/10 of an inch. So when the tractor goes through the field, we can determine where it's at from our iPad, from our desktop, and the tractor will guide itself through the field. But the latest and greatest stuff is around sensor technology, so detecting a weed in a field as we go through the field and spraying just that weed, but not spraying the bare ground beside it that doesn't need a spray pass, which reduces herbicide usage, which is better for the environment, eliminates runoff. So it's just making the life of the farmer a lot easier, making their farm more efficient.
So how have Indiana farmers embraced the latest technology?
We are blessed in Indiana with progressive producers. Producers who understand the application of technology, who understand, I want to make my production better. I want to make my farm better. And we have a really unique opportunity at Reynolds Farm Equipment, as well as a state, to wrap our arms around those producers, link the power and technology industry with our power and agriculture industry to create an entirely new economy. And we can do that here.
Mary Rachel Redman, Inside Indiana Business.
Later in the podcast, INDYCAR looks to the future with hybrid technology, and our weekly Insiders panel takes on the top stories of the week. But now, the Indiana University Melvin and Bren Simon Cancer Center is now a comprehensive cancer center, which is the National Cancer Institute's highest designation. It now joins a class of only 51 centers throughout the U.S. to earn the title. Director Dr. Patrick Lehrer joined Kylie Valletta in the business of health.
The IU Simon Cancer Center has been a clinical cancer center for 20 years. What's the significance of being bumped up to this highest tier, comprehensive cancer center?
Sure. There's a lot of really great hospitals in the country and great universities. Only a few of them actually become NCI designated cancer centers, and we've been that way for 20 years. This is like going from a college freshman basketball team to be in the NBA. To be in there in the elite group of hospitals, as you mentioned, with Dana-Farber, MD Anderson, Johns Hopkins, we're now at the table with them. It means a lot for our members to be able to have this kind of respect, to be in that group of people.
One of the biggest achievements at the IU Simon Cancer Center is that it found the cure for testicular cancer. So this new designation, what does that mean, and the funding that comes with it, what does that mean for research moving forward?
Yeah, so the designation of comprehensiveness actually means that we have excellence in basic research, clinical research, and population science, and we show great synergy between these, as well as doing work around Indiana and beyond. The essence of what we do is team science. We've got over 250 members of our cancer center. So if you have a disease like Tessa's cancer, and Larry Einhorn, he worked with the urologist to put together a regimen. Cancers today are much more complex, and it requires a team of researchers understanding the biology of this. So what this means is, particularly for our patients, what it means is that they are going to have a team of people behind their physicians to help them with their cancers.
Now let's talk a little bit about the patients. If you're a newly diagnosed patient with cancer in Indiana, I mean, what does this mean for them?
Mm-hmm. Well, I think, first of all, it means that patients don't need to travel to get the best care. This is really an elite cancer institute that has outstanding doctors and nurses, but also has a team of researchers behind it. The cancer itself is far more complex than we thought it was 30 or 40 years ago, when we might pick a drug off the shelf and try to treat it. We now realize that the genetic makeup of cancer is unique with each patient who has cancer. And understanding that, the pathways that are involved with that, allow us now to look at specific markers and treatments that hit targets that can impact the outcomes of patients with cancer, and also their symptoms.
And the center has also been a springboard for startup companies, patents, intellectual property. How does this designation build more momentum for those types of things?
Well, again, we have the best and the brightest in Indiana University, and they want to make a difference. And so many of our researchers, such as Dr. David Boothman and Mark Kelly, have worked on pathways, identified drugs, and then created startup companies to help support these. We've had probably about 65 different patents that have come over the last few years, about 13 different startup companies. So our research actually is an incubator for the business here in Indiana.
And there are only 50 other comprehensive cancer centers in the country. What does this mean for Indiana, for IU Simon Cancer Center, our reputation on a national scale?
Yeah, we've been doing great work here for many years, but what this does is it puts an imprimatur on our work. And the last cancer center in the country that came from the Midwest was 11 years ago. And so this is something that's a very rare prize to get, and I think it's a great designation. So I think basically we should be proud of this as citizens of Indiana, that we are up there in the ranks of all the other scientists in the country.
Just a few seconds left, not to make it all about money, but this is a lot more funding comes with it.
So we will get about 50% more dollars in this grant period than we had last time, and that we'll use this for helping to buy shared resources, equipment for our group, help with pilot projects, and this will also help attract the top talent from around the country.
All right, Dr. Lair, thanks for being here, and again, congratulations.
It's my pleasure. Thanks, Kylie.
Still to come, perspective on the week's top stories with our panel of insiders. But first, the NTT INDYCAR Series will introduce its first hybrid powertrain systems in 2022. Both Chevrolet and Honda are expected to offer the new motors. INDYCAR President Jay Fry talked about the upcoming change with Bill Benner in this week's Inside Indiana Sports.
So let's talk about the engine first. In layman's terms, kind of what will this mean? Yeah.
Well, basically, it's a hybrid unit that will be in conjunction with the internal combustion engines that we currently have. So it's a bolt-on piece that adds to our current configuration. It'll add a lot of horsepower, which is something that we're really excited about. It'll add some safety features, one being the cars will now have electric starters, which they've never have had that before. So think of it when a driver spins and he stalls, they'll be able to just start it up and drive off. Perfect. It'll make the drivers safer, that they're not exposed. It'll make our AMR safety guys safer, that they're not having to come out in an umbilical cord to restart the car. And then it will also hopefully speed up the pace of the race. You won't have to have cautions, that type of thing. So we're really excited about that. The other piece, again, what we're trying to do more and more with these cars is have less downforce and more horsepower, put it in the driver's hands. That will do, this is a new technology that will help do that. So it's really, we're really excited about it. One of the things that we do is we have our core values, which is fast, loud, authentic, and unapologetic.
Yeah.
So anything we do has got to match up to that, and we feel this does because it's going to make them, our cars are going to be faster. There's going to be some really high speeds at lots of different places.
Yeah,
so we're quite excited.
Still fast and loud. I mean,
still fast, and we even think maybe even louder.
Yeah, yeah.
Yes.
And for those of us who live in here in Indianapolis, what kind of, will we see increased speeds at the Motor Speedway?
Yeah, absolutely. If you think of 50 horsepower-ish is what this unit could possibly do. 50 horsepower can equate to around 5 miles an hour, depending on, drag and different things. But there's some things going on for next year that I think we'll see increased speeds at the Speedway. Then, going forward to 2022 with this hybrid unit, it'll add 50 more to that piece too. So it's going to be fast.
Let's talk about the aero screen, an important safety feature that will, again, try to explain it to me, but it'll give the greater driver safety.
Right.
Yeah,
Yeah, no, it's, we hope we think it's a cutting edge, kind of a global initiative that you're going to see that we come up with this technology. We did it in conjunction with Red Bull, Red Bull's Formula One team. We had worked the last couple of years on a kind of an aero screen, and we're having some success, but couldn't quite get it over the top. So Red Bull had actually worked on a piece. We partnered with them to come up with what we're currently seeing. So we should have this our first on-track test should be in about 6 weeks, hopefully 6 to 7 weeks. We're quite excited. Again, everything we do, think about it, is from, does it look like an INDYCAR still? Absolutely. It looks like a fighter jet. I mean, so it actually looks cool. And again, we think it'll be a new world standard on safety for drivers, which we're also very excited about.
As we wrap up, we got about a minute left. It's been a great season thus far, and Newgarden and Rossi are coming right to it. We got 4 races left, but the NBC package, it's been a good year.
NBC has been an incredible partner. I think you saw a lot of what they did, for the 500, of how they really make it a really big event, which it's always been a big event, but NBC's really good at making big events even bigger. I think our ratings to date are up 10 to 14%, depending on what metric you look at. So any league who can say right now that their ratings are up, that's obviously very encouraging and very positive. I think it's been really good to have consistency amongst the one broadcaster. So whether it's NBC Sports or NBC, a lot of cross promotions, Kentucky Derby, NFL, NASCAR now. There's a lot of things going on that's helping all of us. So we're really excited about the future with that.
Well, we'll be at Laguna Seca and crowning a champion before we know it. Jay Fry, we certainly appreciate you making time to come on the program.
Sir. Thank you for having me.
Best of luck.
Thank you.
And finally, our insiders weigh in on Indiana's top business stories. This week's panel includes Vox Global Senior Vice President Francesca Jarosz-Brady, Winston Terrell Group Principal Robin Winston, and Faegre Baker Daniels partner Murray Clark.
We began in the first half of the show. Robin was out at the Indiana State Fairgrounds, always a fun time to be out there. But there is a business side, certainly to agriculture, but also to the state fair. The fair itself, and then this Indiana State Fairgrounds, which has changed. It's a 365-day-a-year venue, and they've invested a lot of money to make that a place that people want to go to.
It's also the front door for Indianapolis to a lot of people. I mean, you come down Benford, and a lot of people are coming down that way, lined up. That's their first time they've been in our city. It's a good footprint for our city. They've been smart enough to be diverse in the programming they've had at the State Fair. The whole area, I just think it's great. It's a tremendous boon for our community.
Could you make the argument that the fair, it's been around, I think, since 1852 maybe, but that the relevance, maybe it waned at one point, but is maybe coming back and is greater than it's been because of the focus on the ag biosciences, agriculture, careers in agriculture, and the fair really showcasing that?
I think that's clearly part of it. I also think it's a juggernaut in employing people. There are a lot of people that live in our community that go work at the State Fair, but you also see the residual when you start talking about the people at Reynolds and other places that are ag business. They can showcase what they have at the State Fair, too. I think it's fantastic for us.
On the negative side, or difficult side, I guess, in terms of the state of the ag industry in Indiana, lots of rain in the spring. It's been dry recently, so the weather really wreaking havoc for Indiana farmers around the state. The governor has requested disaster assistance from the federal government for 88 of the state's 92 counties. Sometimes people, I think, Francesca, overestimate or don't look at the economic impact that agriculture has on the state.
Absolutely, and I think the downside you're seeing is with the farming industry. I think the upside, which you mentioned and Robin alluded to as well, is the ag biosciences sector and the great work that groups like AgriNovus are doing to really bring those companies together. And it's really exciting to see Corteva, on the New York Stock Exchange recently. And I think there's promising momentum with some of the startups as well. So that's the good news, I think, around that sector.
Yeah, a lot of focus on talent in the agriculture sector and talent overall in Indiana. There was news this week that Ball State University is joining an initiative that's really focused on turning the brain drain and talent leaving the state to the brain gain, bringing it back. Murray, as you look at that, these are efforts. We had the Your Fellowship folks on earlier in the show. That's been around 18 years, one of the really first big programs to get at that. Do you think we're gaining as a state in this brain drain issue?
Well, I think it's important that Ball State's involved in the discussion and that higher ed is generally. And Purdue's been a leader, kind of an innovator in this. And I think the way we've talked about brain drain for, 2 decades or more. But I think the efforts today are sophisticated, they're intelligent, and I think it's really important that higher ed's an involved part of that.
And is it a complex issue? I guess you talk about quality of life, quality of place, those types of things, making Indianapolis or Fort Wayne or Evansville, wherever it is, an attractive place where people want to go. You got to have things to do. A lot of elements that kind of go into it, especially when you look at attracting young professionals.
Absolutely. I think job security is a huge part of it too, especially as we look at sort of this next generation, Gen Z, the oldest of whom are 22. They say that the most important thing as they look at jobs is security and pay. So as we continue to really focus on our economic growth, hopefully we can appeal to that generation as well as a place to stay.
You talk Gen Z, we talk Gen Con, which recently wrapped up in Indianapolis. Robin, as you look at that event, which is huge, estimated a $70 million impact, the gamers from around the globe really that come here. And that's an event, I think they had 60+ thousand, maybe 70,000 people at the convention center. You look at the video on the screen now, it gives you an idea. But it just keeps getting bigger. And the impact and the pressure on Indianapolis to have facilities and accommodations to allow for that growth as well.
Facilities and accommodations, but also just what we talked about during RIFRA. I mean, if we had not addressed that issue, I doubt Gen Con would be here. So what you're seeing is a place that is welcoming. And when you have a community that's welcoming, Maynard Jackson, my mentor, former mayor of Atlanta, their slogan was "the city too busy to hate." When you demonstrate to people, particularly in the environment we're in now, that you're busy and working on bringing people in and welcoming, that's how you get Gen Con sticking around for year after year.
Yeah, Murray, as you look at it, and again, that focus on being inclusive and welcoming, but also having the facilities, it's somewhat of an arms race. If you look at the convention business around the country, very competitive. We have a big proposal on Pan Am Plaza for 2 hotels. That's not been scaled back, but maybe delayed a little bit. You think it's a prudent move?
Well, I think this illustrates, well, the growth of the convention business, first of all, is such a positive thing for the city, and the region. But I think what this tells you is that the capacity, the hotel and the room capacity is growing. And we've seen discussion about, you mentioned a couple of the hotel projects. So there are others out there kind of percolating as well. And so I think the market studies and the discussion about capacity is interesting. And I think the growth in the convention business helps justify more and more rooms, which again, great from an employment standpoint, economic impact standpoint as well. By the way, Comic-Con, end of this month as well,
yes,
right?
Another one, that's right, that continues to grow as well. Changing landscape as we switch gears in the media business, not only here in Indianapolis, but around the state. News this week that the parent of the Indianapolis Star is being acquired by New Media, a large corporate media entity. Francesca, as you look at that, new ownership at Channel 13, the NBC station here in Indianapolis, at Wish TV as well. Lots of change. A lot of attention has gone to the newspaper industry. And where is the future of the print industry?
Well, I started my career at the INDYCAR, so it's near and dear to my heart. And I think local journalism and regional newspapers are so critically important. So the optimist in me, is hopeful for this deal, but I think probably the more realist is concerned about just the loss of local reporting staff and a move to more consolidated national
Is there
news.
another model out there? I know on the sports side of things, The Athletic is this kind of a new model, online model that seems to be gaining traction.
You're seeing a lot with nonprofits. If you look at Chalkbeat Indiana, which focuses on education news, and there are other models, ProPublica as well. I think it sort of remains to be seen what will work, and we just have to continue to be innovative and hope that we can save it because it's so critically important.
Lots of change too in the business of sports when you look at collegiate sports. Certainly at the Division I level, it is such a big business. A lot of investment being made in venues, trying to make that game experience important and good for fans. Ross-Ade Stadium at Purdue. The Board of Trustees recently approved another big step toward what could be ultimately a $125 million renovation. A lot of big ideas being thrown around out there. But these types of things, it's a business investment in these programs.
It's a business investment. It's also a confidence maker for the president of the university and for his football coach and for the athletic department. I mean, you don't make that kind of investment unless you're believing your program is going to be successful. They have Brom there now for several years, and they've made that a priority and a commitment. Outstanding athletic director and moving it up. Look at what Cindy Simon-Scott did at IU. Look at the change there. This is becoming recruiting tools now, Gary. So you got to be very careful in trying to recruit people unless you can be competitive.
Yeah, and things like improved Wi-Fi at the stadium, beer sales. I used to get beer sales at football this year. Who would have thought you'd have beer sales? But now most of the Big Ten teams, I think, have it. So it's a changing landscape. Does this continue to escalate?
Well, the football attendance is so important to the budgets of the bigger schools, although the the Big Ten schools have done very well with the Big Ten television channel, that kind of differentiates it. So making the spectator experience as enjoyable as possible is so important to these big schools.
Well, hey, I want to get a quick, I mentioned Colts camp. In fact, as we're taping this, the first preseason game for the Colts on tap here. But Westfield, that Grand Park, this idea has just exploded, and now they've got the Colts.
Come across there on a Saturday, you come across and see all the new growth there and people in downtown Westfield, and it's just energy, is what I'd say. And also, it is doing what we've always talked about in suburbia, and that is people from Indianapolis are going north, being welcome, and then being able to come back. So it's just great. It's tremendous.
Well, with that, we'll put a wrap on another edition of The Insiders. Robin Winston, Francesca Jarosz-Brady, and also Murray Clark.
That wraps up this week's Inside Indiana Business Television podcast. Remember, you can find all of this week's TV segments, as well as the top business news from throughout the state, at InsideIndianaBusiness.com. While you're there, you can also subscribe to our platform of free e-newsletters. This is Andy Ober for Inside Indiana Business.